Hi there, and welcome to Scheduling Fate. I'm Jamie McGee. I'm an author, astrologer, and I love helping those around me unlock the magic within them and hidden in everyday moments. Here at Scheduling Fate, you're going to find grounded insight to help you co create with the beautiful, unfolding story of your life. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Hi there, and welcome into Scheduling Fate. My name's Jamie, and today's topic is going to be around shadow work. And I just want to, give you a little bit of a behind the scenes story with these types of episodes. Usually I just go about my day and I'm doing my thing, and someone will say something to me or someone will mention something to me. And if I'll grab it, I'll be like, oh, wow, that's interesting. And I'll hold on to it. And then a few days, few hours, few weeks, it all varies. Someone else will say something, or I'll see something, or I'll hear something, and it just gets louder and louder and louder until I know that I definitely need to talk about it because either I need to hear it or someone else needs to hear it. And if I don't, lightning may strike me. Okay, maybe not to that extreme, but what I'm trying to say is when things like this come through, when we have episodes like this, it's because something very powerful has been prodding and poking and putting something in front of me over and over to the point where I begin to understand it. And when I understand it clearly enough, I always want to get on here and explain it to you because even if one of you find this helpful, it's definitely worth the time and effort to pull it all together and to share it. All right. So, shadow work. It is not something that I think any of us are a fan of. And this is coming from a Scorpio sun. And I do have to say that when I hear clients or I hear people I'm working with saying, I'm done and done, I've done all my shadow work, I'm over that. I sort of cringe just a tad bit because I feel like that's tempting the universe. And usually, when you think you are done, that it's all behind you, the storm is over, really it's more of a pause, a surrender, a time for you to catch your soul breath, your body's breath, and understand what just happened. But you're about to level up. You're about to be tested again because that shadow is part of you, and so is the light. And our objective, our goal is to get the shadow and the light to dance together and us to grow through this energy. All right. So just to tell you how the universe punched this idea into my mindset and some of the personal work I did with it before we get into the type of shadow work that we're working on. All right. So I spend my days a little princess, less than 7 months old. And so there's usually some kind of educational show or TV show on somewhere around taking up this space of sound. And the other day, they were playing a song about the planets, and of course, my astrology ear just tuned in because I wanted to see the planets come across and how they described them. And I found it amusing how some of the planets that are benefics and beautiful got underscored, and then planets like Saturn were like, "Oh, and Saturn with its beautiful rings." And then Pluto came up, the very last planet. It was actually in this song. I think some songs eliminate it, but it was like this tiny, tiny little planet. And the song made it seem as if Pluto was very innocent and cute and tiny, probably like all the listeners of the show or the song. And I thought to myself, man, that tiny planet, though, it carry a punch. And that drew me in a little bit deeper to just contemplating Pluto for the next couple of days. So as I'm walking with Pluto, I was also listening to a podcast, and the podcast was playing an older episode that they had with James Doty, who had just passed away recently. And I was like, you know what? I know that name. I've downloaded those books. They're waiting for me to read because I have a host of things that I want to read or digest. And I was like, why do I have his books? And then it didn't take me long to realize why I had his books because he was a neurosurgeon, entrepreneur, a philanthropist, but he was also someone who talked about the power of manifestation and the energy that you had. But in this episode, he was speaking, he was telling his story, and they're like, "Well, why are you here?" And what really pulled me out of the 10 things I was probably doing at the same time is he talked about his childhood, which was very similar to mine. He said, I was raised by an alcoholic father, a severely depressed mother who was suicidal. I was raised in poverty, and I had somebody, come across and teach me how to manifest, how to relax, how to get out of that fight or flight. And he took those lessons, and along his lifetime, he was able to find all the material wealth and success that he had. Of course, we always hear that story where people find all that beautiful wealth and they have it physically, but then they have a spiritual mishap and they lose everything. And then they have to go back and re-manifest again, which is also a great example of how we dance with the shadow and the light. But in this episode, James gave a little bit of exercise. He threw it out like it was his common day practice. But again, this grabbed me. And the exercise was to sit down and write down a list of things that you were told to believe in your childhood, whether that came from your parents, your peers, or your friends, like what beliefs were instilled in you as a child? And then to write what is actually true or what you are manifesting to be true. I'll tell you that I'm not really one to journal. I'm not one to write down intentions and goals. There's just some block that I have there, which is ironic because I am an author. I have a Gemini moon. I'm all about writing. I'm all about the words. I'm a wordsmith, but I couldn't get this out of my head. So when I had a few moments, I sat down and I started listing things out. And I don't want to list everything out because we all deserve to work through our shadow privately and not be out there in the public. So some of the things that I wrote down were, the only luck I have is bad luck. I remember my dad always saying that as he's trying to fix a car on the weekend. So we had a way to get to school or a way to get to work. Money is evil. Those people with money are always trying to take advantage of you. Losing weight or health and fitness is impossible. It just doesn't work. You do all the things and nothing happens. No one wants to hear your voice. No one wants to hear your ideas. Sit down, be obedient, obey, listen, be seen, not be heard. Things like this. These are integrated long term. And I am Generation X. So I think some of you are hearing this are like, oh my gosh, whoever told you that? But this was way back in the day. And underneath this, I had to write down the truth of it, like things like money is not evil. The love of money is evil. You can do a lot of things. You can be a philanthropist. You can give. You can add to your community. And luck is what you make of it. Where you put your intentions, things come to you. And fitness and health is something that it comes into a habit or a ritual. I had to really deprogram that because every time I would hit a roadblock with any of those matters, those Venus matters, I would hear those echoes of things from my childhood. But I tore this piece of paper in half and I held on to the new truth. And I'm going to tell you guys one more thing that was weird about this experience. When I wrote down all of the beliefs from the past, it came out fluently. And if you ask anybody who knows me, I have horrible handwriting. Also ironic because I'm an author, but I mean horrid handwriting. But this was like the bubble writing. I was writing a note in sixth grade, passing it to someone, beautiful handwritten words about everything that I was told to believe. On the bottom, and I could say, well, I was running out of time, but that's not true. But on the bottom, when I was writing the truth of every bullet point, it was messy. It was entangled. If you were to read it back, it didn't even look like they were actual words because there were spaces between certain things. There was this hesitation. Like I felt like if I, on a subconscious level, maybe if I wrote this, I was going to get in trouble because I was breaking those laws. And I was thinking to myself, man, this exercise is powerful because even the handwriting was different. That alone was mind blowing. But I tore the paper apart, the part that was the new truth. I wanted to hold on to that, put it in a sacred space and come back to it and practice writing it to where the writing would get better, which I'm going to do in a couple of days. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to burn these. I'm going to go through this process and I'm going to take the lighter outside. I'm going to go to the fire pit. I'm going to burn this. So I'll tell you, as I'm recording this, we've had excessive heat warnings. Like the air is still, it's thick. If you want a free sauna for everybody, walk outside, you're going to detox. So I go outside and I take the lighter and I take the note over the fire pit and I just figured this thing's going to blow up. I'm actually holding it with my fingernails, not wanting to get burned. It singes the corner and then it stops because a breeze came out of nowhere. I'm like, what? I did it again. Same thing. Did it again. The same thing. Like I'm burning just a little bit at a time, but the words were just staying. And I was like, this is insanely symbolic. I had to go up to the porch, find a little corner and light it again. I had to go and do extra work. I had to go out of my boundary, out of where I was to do extra work to get this piece of paper to burn and then take it back to the fire pit. And even then, this tiny, tiny little corner stayed. And I could not get that tiny, tiny corner that didn't have any words on it to burn. And I was like, man, that is powerful. That is Pluto. That is the shadow. That is how you work with it. And it definitely reminds me, if you guys have not seen this, hopefully listening to me say this will bring it into your algorithm. But there is a meme or some kind of video out there that talks about what healing looks like. And it takes a dark glass of water, like think about Coke or something. And then it turns the water on and pours it into the glass of Coke. And you can see the darkness does start to swirl around and leave, but it takes a long time for that to become pure water. The darkness has to overflow, the pure water comes in. And that's what this practice reminded me of. But if you have not done an exercise like that, if you're one that likes to write things down, or even not, because I told you guys, I'm not a fan of writing things down, I do recommend that You do like really ask yourself, what was I told that I still believe? And I don't care if you're 20, I don't care if you're 70. This will really open your mind up to why you do the things or why you believe the things, or even if you're a parent or a grandparent, what you are passing on to people around you. It's fascinating. Now, I wanted to take this because this is an astrology podcast and wrap this shadow work around some things that I've heard some of my clients mention, but also some of the things that I recognize in a chart. Of course, you guys know I pulled up James Doty's chart and I can see some of these things in his chart as well. What I know of it, I don't know the actual time of birth. But when it comes to shadow work, this idea I heard one of my clients mention, but I've also done some research on it. And we could attribute it to Carl Jung. Carl Jung said there's three types of shadow work, but his idea has been built on. He laid the foundation for it. And other people like James Hillman and archetypal psychology have reveled in these ideas and built on them. And now it's almost common day practice. But the three types of shadows or archetypes that you're holding, or you could lean into one more than the other, are the outcast, the victim, and the rebel. And we can see this in the archetype of your chart as well. But the archetype of the outcast would be that energy where you feel like you don't belong or you have been rejected simply for being who you are. So, in my case, being born in poverty or being born in a situation that doesn't fit the area around you. So, even without doing anything, without initiating anything, there's this sense of rejection and isolation or being misunderstood. Like, I didn't mean to offend or do anything. I took a breath and I'm here. So it can show up in a way where you feel like you're struggling to connect on an authentic basis. You have to put a mask on in order to connect with other people. You could feel invisible in a crowd. You're just background, you're a wallflower. It could be something that would cause you to avoid being intimate or vulnerable because you fear the rejection. You were rejected just from existing. What if you actually show what's going on inside of you? So ways that you could heal this would be acknowledging that you feel different, explore that subconscious thing, like that exercise we just talked about, and really practice self acceptance. Why do you need that outward acceptance when you have everything you need on the inside? And also to remember that what makes you different often becomes your greatest asset. We see this in the chart. We'll talk about where these transits show up in just a second. Now, the second of the three is the victim archetype. So this would be where you feel powerless or like something is constantly happening to you. So if your parents or the people in charge of you are arguing, are in despair, are upset, and you don't know how to fix it, you have no control to fix this situation, or you're in a very challenging relationship with your spouse or friends or anything, a work relationship, you feel powerless and there's nothing you can do but survive. I remember being a child just wishing and praying that I could do something about the situation just to stop it. Like your body's flexed, your emotions are flexed, you have this turning in your stomach, like something's going to go wrong. You stay in fight or flight when you have this type of energy. What it can lead to is also blaming external forces on how you feel or your unhappiness. And this is something that's hard because when you are in a trauma base, especially as a child, and I'm speaking from personal experience, not from any specialty here, but when you are raised in a very traumatic situation where you don't even know that it's trauma because it's common day, you didn't know anything that wasn't trauma, so it's normal. Sometimes you could feel like, well, if that didn't happen, I would be just fine. If I had this income, or if I have this house, or if I had these clothes, or if I had these new shoes or this new book bag, everything would be fine because this person wouldn't say something about me, or I would be able to focus on my schoolwork because I wouldn't be on the defense. So this could be that energy that could lead to feeling stuck, or you're waiting for validation from other people. Other people to say, yeah, it's okay. You can come out, or you're waiting for someone to rescue you. And ways that you can heal and grow this is to recognize your personal power, that manifestation power, to shift your perspective from life happens to me to life happens for me. There's something that you can appreciate. You had a meal, you had a place to sleep, you had a pet to keep you company. Now, there's also the rebel archetype when it comes to the shadow energy. And that's when you find yourself constantly pushing against authority or breaking rules, even if it could cause trouble. And I do remember going through this as well as I got older. I remember debating, believe it or not, theology and psychology and the way that people thought about certain things. I was on that brink of where the feminine energy was coming through and trying to express itself. But this energy can show up as resisting rules or authority without reason. You just feel like debating it. You've had enough. This is something that I've seen a lot. And it reminds me of the saying, the straw that broke the camel's back. And this is where someone takes something and they take something, they take big, heavy things and they hold on to it and they hold on to it. but then something just in passing, something very minor, something very light happens, and then they blow up like that. That's it. That's it. We're burning it down. I'm done. That is the last straw. That's where this rebel energy can sometimes show up inside of you, or you can see it inside of other people. But ways that you can heal and grow it is to ask yourself, am I looking for freedom? And how can I get freedom? How can I be a rebel with a cause? And to use that energy in a constructive way. How can you inspire other people? How can you balance independence with cooperation and say, you know what, that's how you feel. This is how I feel. We are going to be at an impasse. How can we move forward? But just to wrap up this section before we get into some transits that would invoke this on a monthly, yearly basis in your life, shadow work involves shining this very gentle and compassionate light on parts of yourself. And when you recognize those parts of yourself and you say, okay, well, this is that archetype of shadow work, or this is something that I'm working with, you reclaim powerful aspects of your identity. You're able to ask yourself, do I believe that because I was told to believe that? Or do I believe that because it's true? And that could be a spiritual question. It could be a reality question. It could be something about relationships, something about money, something about health and vitality. That question will you down into a deep state of reflection, which I personally do not think that we have enough space to do right now. I remember growing up pre Google, when you were waiting for things to happen or when you were on a walk or you were doing things, there wasn't this need to pick up your phone and scroll and get stimulated by whatever is in your algorithm. There was time to contemplate, there was time to think, and we don't even have those seconds anymore to contemplate or think. So I would recommend if you can take them, if there's a certain time where you want to reach for your device, to give yourself a minute and say, what can I think about right now? What can I process? What can I dig into? Why do I want to do that? Why do I feel angry or happy? Or why do I not care anymore? Dig into that. When it comes to these three archetypes, some things to ask yourself. The outcast, if you're feeling that way, what's unique to you? What are you hiding because you fear rejection? Because the way the skies are built at all times, but especially today with the energy that we're working with, it's the authentic energy that is the most powerful. That is what is going to be seen. And if you feel like you have that victim shadow that you're working with, where in your life can you reclaim your power? That's a Plutonian thing. Where are you giving up your power and how can you call it back? And if you have that rebel energy, how can you channel that rebel energy into the spirit of being creative and making positive and meaningful change? And by embracing all of this shadow work, you're going to go on a journey toward living authentically and in wholeness and ultimately transforming those shadows into sources of strength. They're definitely there for a reason. Everything in your chart is designed on purpose and on time, and you unpack it as you move through the journey and the story of your life. So, as I was reflecting on Pluto, shadow work, this experience that I had trying to burn one tiny piece of paper, and the three different types of shadow work outcast, victim, and rebel, I asked myself, okay, what planets would contribute to that? Because this is not something that's one and done. We do shadow work every single day, subconsciously or consciously, but there's definitely times where it feels like you are riding a wave. So, a couple of things that you can look for in your chart. And if you don't have a chart, you can go to schedulingfate.com and I'll show you how to get one and how you can work through this. There's a lot of articles about learning your own astrology. So, one of the things that I would recommend that you do, and there is an episode about this, is check out your Chiron placement. The Chiron placement could easily reflect or reveal where you may be working with the outcast part of your shadow, especially if you find Chiron in the first, fourth, seventh, or 11th houses. That's where you could feel a lot of energy around rejection or not belonging to your life. The first house is who you are. The fourth house is your roots and your foundation, where you're supposed to feel secure. Your seventh house is your partnerships, your alliances, but it's also open enemies. And the 11th house is your tribe and your people. So if we have Chiron speaking to these energies by transit or in your natal chart, there could be that automatic sense of rejection. The fourth house would be around your parents and your family. Now, Saturn aspects, if you have harsh aspects in your natal chart or by transit, this would be a square or opposition. That's what we call harsh aspects. to your personal planets. That can give you some issues around self worth, or you could feel lonely, or you could feel isolated. Now, I would also encourage you to look where your Aquarius or your Uranus energies are in your chart because strong Aquarian energy placements or harsh Uranus aspects can create feelings of being different or misunderstood. This reminds me of that childhood book, The King is Wearing No Clothes. And I won't go down that road again, but the Aquarians are able to see outside of the pattern or what you were told to believe. And if you're looking at a situation and you have this unique perspective and no one else sees it the way that you do, that can make you feel like an outcast. And monthly, when you're invited to resolve this, would be when the moon transits your natal Chiron or your Saturn or opens up that Aquarian house. You want to pay attention to when you have Saturn returns or transits to these areas, and also when you have your Chiron return around the age of 50. Now, I would tell you good ways to integrate this outcast feeling is to use your Chiron or your Saturn transit to consciously practice self acceptance. Explore what makes you unique rather than focusing on the rejection because your tribe is out there. There's 7 billion people, I think, or maybe more on the planet. Your people are out there who needs to hear you. That me too. I'm in agreement. They're out there. You just have to lean in and just worry about that inner vibration, and that will attract anything and anyone that you need. We don't need outside acceptance. We need the inside acceptance. Now, the victim archetype, we could find this in the chart or recognize it through Neptune placements or aspects. So, Neptune squares, oppositions, conjunctions with your personal planets that could create confusion or that sense of being a victim or even that martyr energy. Now, Pisces signatures or things or planets in your 12th house could also lean towards this energy. And you would also want to notice where your South Node placements are because often they will reflect past life wounds or a habitual victim mentality that you have. When I say victim mentality, I'm not saying that this is your fault or you're playing the victim. I'm saying that there was more than likely a situation where you were the victim. And now you're looking for that pattern where you want to come out of it. You want to come to the other side of it. Now, on a monthly basis, we're going to have the moon trigger these parts of your chart that I mentioned. Yearly, the sun is going to activate them as well. And as these transits come through, you want to focus on clarity and boundaries when we're, especially when we're working with Neptune, because Neptune does not have boundaries. So you need, at the very least, a spiritual boundary. And then consciously shift from victimhood to empowerment through actionable self care and responsibility. So, another way to look at this is not suppressing or trying to ignore the shadow or the voice or the doubt, but turn around and ask yourself, why do I believe that? Why did that happen to me? And how can I use that to empower others? How can my story help other people? Now, the third archetype, the rebel, the resistance to that authority or the issues around you, we can recognize that in Uranus placements. So, harsh Uranus aspects to personal planets give you this strong drive to resist authority or to feel restricted very easily. One rule, one boundary gets put into place. And you're like, no, I'm definitely tearing that one down. You are not going to control me. I've been controlled all these years. It's not going to happen anymore. You resist it before you understand or appreciate that there's a compromise or a reason around that. Now, Mars squares or oppositions to Saturn and Pluto in your natal chart or by transit could also trigger that need to rebel, that power struggle. Also, look for areas that are ruled by Mars or Uranus. So, this is your Aries house, your Scorpio house, and your Aquarius house. This is where you want to be independent, where you go deep, but also you can feel a little bit confrontational when you are pressed to make changes or to initiate something that you don't want to initiate. So, monthly, of course, the moon is going to activate all of these areas in your chart. Yearly, as the sun moves through, it will also activate these areas of your chart. But I would also encourage you to notice Uranus transits or squares, Mars retrogrades, Mars transits around your Saturn or Pluto. Is it in opposition or squaring? And also when these planets move. Now, you'll have a Uranus opposition in your 40s. That's what we call the quote unquote midlife crisis, where you feel restless, where things that used to just light you up don't light you up anymore. And that's usually a good time for a soul check. So, some tips about this rebel energy is to channel it into, again, that creative freedom, innovation, and positive leadership. Reflect on why you were rebelling against something and consciously choose to rebel in a purposeful way. Be a rebel with a cause. So, other times that you would be invited to work with the shadow, when we have the new moon, setting intentions on that area of your life. What do you believe? What were you told to believe? Why do you believe it? How can you change this as you move towards the full moon energy? Another good time to set up goals for the year would be right before your birthday, reflecting on where you are in life, what that last year looked like, what you want this new year to look like, and how you can move forward. Of course, Saturn returns, Uranus oppositions, Chiron returns, Neptune squares. All of these are going to invite you to go deep. But if you were doing this ritualistic reflection each month as the moon activates these points, each time that shadow gets triggered, when you hit these big, huge transits that rock your world, you feel a little bit more steady. You recognize it for what it is. It doesn't feel like it swells up and envelops you. Instead, you're like, I understand who you are. I know where that's coming from. I'm a little in awe that you're still here because I consciously and I thought unconsciously worked with this shadow. But if you're still here, can we have this dance? Can we work through this energy? What are you trying to teach me? How can I grow through this? It's a very powerful thing to work with on a minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year process. And I will say, and I'm going to say fortunately, not unfortunately, the shadow work is never done. There's another level, there's another process, and there's something there for you to use. It is your greatest gift. As Joseph Campbell said, the cave that you fear the most is the one that you are supposed to enter. Your shadow work is your hero's journey. So as we close out, a couple of things that I would recommend is that maybe you check out some of James Doty's work. James Doty unfortunately just passed away, but has left a legacy, some beautiful books out there for you to check out. And to also do that practice, write down some things that you were told to believe, see if you can burn that, see if your letter works better than mine. And then how well or how easy it is for you to write your new truth or the truth that you know it to be now. Take a look at your chart. Ask yourself, where is this shadow work? Where do I get invited to do this every month? And of course, I'm always here to help you look at your chart as well. You can either submit a question and I'll give you a recorded answer back, or we can sit down in a Zoom call and talk through some things about what you're working with now and where you're being invited to grow. But I do hope that this message that the universe demanded, I will say quietly demanded, that I talked about today was helpful to one of you out there. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for hitting like and subscribe. It definitely supports this podcast and allows me to continue to offer more free content. All right. I'll see you next time.